The morning began like all others, heavy with silence and the smell of damp soil. Elias Harrow moved through his fields with a steady rhythm, his body hardened by years of repetition. The land was stubborn, demanding sweat for every stalk of wheat allowed to rise, but he treated it with quiet reverence. Each motion carried the weight of memory. His wife's laughter once echoing across these rows, the small voice of a daughter long buried beneath the earth. Loss had carved him hollow, but habit filled the empty spaces. He rose, he worked, he endured. His neighbor saw only a weary widower, but within him lingered a resilience as sharp as the morning air. The village beyond his farm clung to its narrow ways, cautious of anything that challenged routine. Outsiders rarely passed through without feeling the coldness of watching eyes. A stranger's accent could spark suspicion. A strange tool might draw whisper warnings. In this place, conformity was survival. The people valued predictability over curiosity, safety over change. Elias lived among them, but never truly with them. Their gossip rolled off him like rain on stone. He had learned long ago that grieving men were granted space, but only so long as they did not disrupt the order. Any who did found themselves judged, and judgment in this village could cut sharper than any blade. Authority in the community wore familiar faces. The mayor, with his stern posture and careful words, served as a figure of stability, though his eyes betrayed the fear of losing control. The priest carried gentler wisdom, reminding the people that mercy was as much a shield as discipline. Yet balance was fragile, easily broken by suspicion. Among the farmers, one man watched Elias with narrowed eyes, a neighbor who saw oddities where others saw silence. Jealous of Elias's solitude and resentful of his independence, the man nursed small grudges, like embers waiting for dry grass. One night, the sky betrayed its secrets. A streak of light tore across the horizon, burning white against black velvet. The village awoke to whispers of omens, of falling stars that carried curses. Some claimed they had seen fragments break apart and vanish near Elias's fields. Children spoke of shapes moving in the dark, their stories dismissed yet never forgotten. Rumors thickened the air until every creak of windmill and flicker of lantern flame felt unnatural. For Elias, the sight stirred something deeper. He had seen meteors before, but never one that seemed to fall with intent, as though guided by unseen will. Even the animals sensed unease. Livestock shifted restlessly, stamping hooves in the dirt as though shadows pressed too close. Dogs barked at empty corners of the yard, hair bristling, growls rising to panic howls. Chickens refused their coop, scattering wildly at dusk. The rhythms of life bent under invisible pressure, and Elias felt it pressing against him too, though he tried to bury the sensation beneath callous resolve. Nature did not lie. Something foreign had entered the land. Then came the cry. It cut through the trees with sharpness no human throat could manage, high-pitched and trembling with pain. It was not the wail of a wolf, nor the keening of a child, but something between both, threaded with desperation. Elias froze at the edge of his barn, the sound gripping his chest like a hand of ice. Fear whispered to turn away, to let the forest keep its secrets. Yet curiosity, stubborn and human, tugged him forward. Each step into the darkness deepened the dread until he found himself standing at the tree-lean, listening to sobs not meant for mortal ears. Among the shadows he found it, small, fragile, collapsed against a fallen branch. The figure glowed faintly, its skin pale with a sheen that shimmered like dew, limbs too slender for any farm child, features both wondrous and unsettling, eyes too large, shimmering with starlight even in weakness. Its chest rose with shallow effort, the glow flickering like a candle near death. The sight rooted Elias in place. All collided with terror, the ancient instinct to recoil at the unknown warring against the raw truth that he was looking upon a child, alien or not. His hands trembled as he reached down. The warmth of his body pulsed against his calloused palms, fragile yet undeniable. Fear whispered of sickness, of danger, of the wrath his neighbors would unleash if they knew. Yet stronger than fear was something older, an instinct carved into the marrow of humankind, to protect the small, to shield the weak, to answer the cry of a child, no matter what world had birthed it. Elias pulled the creature close. In that moment, fear did not vanish, but it bent, yielding to compassion, as unyielding as the soil beneath his boots. Elias carried the fragile being against his chest, as though the night itself might rip it away. Every shadow seemed sharper, every sound louder. The village slept, yet suspicion was never far, and a single wandering lantern could undo him. He slipped through his gate, boots muffled on familiar soil, and forced himself not to look back. Within the barn, the air was heavy with hay and iron, the earthy smell a shield against the alien strangeness he now harbored. He laid the child among stacked straw, arranging tools and crates to obscure the faint glow of its skin. His farm had become both a sanctuary and a prison, a fragile refuge where secrets would either take root or die. He drew a long breath, already aware that life would never return to the dull safety it once knew. The child stirred, a weak sound rising from its throat, closer to a whimper than a word. Its eyes glimmered faintly, filled with confusion and hunger. Elias rummaged through a basket, producing bread still rough in the oven and a jug of water drawn from his well. He tore the bread into pieces, offering them with hesitant hands. At first, the creature recoiled, trembling, then curiosity overcame fear. Small fingers reached, hesitant but determined, and it nibbled at the bread, washing each bite with greedy sips of water. No words bridged a gulf between them, yet something more profound passed in that exchange. Trust, fragile as glass, had been born, not from understanding, but from kindness freely given. In the dim light, Elias noticed things no human body should display. Cuts across its skin closed before his eyes, knitting together with unnatural speed. When his gaze lifted, he glimpsed constellations swimming within, tiny reflections of star maps unfathomable to earthly minds. At moment of comfort, its skin pulsed softly, glowing as though its body were a lantern powered by emotion. The barn filled with a quiet wonder that defied reason. He realized with shivering clarity that this was no lost traveler from another village. This was a being from far beyond, carrying secrets that stretched into the stars. Awe clashed with fear, leaving him shaken but unable to step away. Yet the world outside was not blind. Whispers spread through crooked lanes of the village, tongues sharpened by boredom and fear. Strange noises, they said, carried from Elias's farm. Lights flickered at odd hours. Some muttered of spirits. Others whispered of demons fallen from the sky. Stories grew with each retelling, winding like ivy until the people no longer questioned their roots. Elias, already an outsider, became the center of quiet suspicion. His solitude, once a shield, now painted him as a keeper of something forbidden. The mayor came with measured steps, eyes heavy with unspoken worries. He reminded Elias that vigilance was their first offense, that outsiders had once brought disease, ruin, and worse. His words dripped with caution, not accusation, but the warning was clear. The village was tightening, its patience thin. Elias nodded, hiding his thoughts beneath a mask of weary respect. Though inside, he felt the walls closing. Each visit, each reminder of duty, pushed him closer to exposure. From across the fence line, sharper eyes watched. The neighbor, bitter and restless, lingered near the edges of Elias's land with suspicion that bordered on obsession. He noticed movements in the barn when there should have been none, glimpsed faint glows through cracks of wood. Where others whispered blindly, he gathered fragments, fitting them into a story he was eager to believe. Jealousy and paranoia twined together until he no longer sought truth, only confirmation of his own suspicions. Elias sensed a gaze but kept his silence, knowing that confrontation would only feed the fire. Night after night, Elias wrestled with his choices. To surrender the child would be to absolve himself of risk, to place the burden on faceless authorities who would dissect mystery with cold precision. Yet every time he imagined it, small hands trembling as they dragged the child away, his gut twisted with betrayal. To protect it meant alienating himself from the only community he had left, risking exile or worse. The fork in the road loomed sharper each day, and no path promised safety. His heart thundered with the weight of decision. At last, silence yielded the answer. In the stillness of the barn, as the child slept with faint light bathing its fragile form, Elias's mind hardened. He would protect it. No decree, no whisper, no threat would move him. He had lost too much already, wife, child, peace, and in this strange being he felt both wound and healing. To abandon it would be to betray not only the child, but himself. The choice carved a new shape into his life, one that could not be undone. Soon, the circle of danger widened. Government scouts, or perhaps planetary patrols, arrived with machines that hummed and scanned the Earth. Drones flickered overhead, their lenses sharp with purpose. Men in uniform spoke with the villagers, asking questions sharpened by suspicion. They demanded honesty, warning of consequences for secrecy. Fear spread to the streets like smoke, curling into every corner. Elias hid the child deeper within the barn, his hands shaking as boots and voices came closer. The shadow of authority hung heavier than the judgment of neighbors, and for the first time, Elias wondered if his secret could withstand its weight. Yet within the barn, life defied fear. The child, now recovering strength, began to mimic sounds and gestures, shaping Elias's words with halting effort. It laughed when a chicken startled, a sound so innocent it cracked open the grief sealed inside Elias's chest. When he hummed an old melody once sung by his wife, the child echoed the tune in fragile tones, filling the air with a ghost of memory made new. They were weaving something beyond protection, a bond that crossed species, bound not by blood or language, but by shared moments of trust. Elias named the child Luma, for the glow that lingered in its skin, and in that naming found a fragment of hope he thought long buried. The glow that clung to the child no longer seemed a wound, but a quiet presence, like the faint shimmer of fireflies on summer nights. Yet Elias knew a being without a name was only half a soul, unanchored in the world. He whispered a word into the dim barn air, soft enough to keep the secret from hungry ears. Luma, a simple name, born of the light that clung to its skin. The child blinked, tilted its head, and repeated the sound with awkward syllables, as if tasting humanity on its tongue. Luma, in that moment, Elias felt something shift. The act was small, yet it bound them together with a thread stronger than hay, or we could conceal. He had given the creature identity, a place in his heart, though the cost of such attachment pressed like iron against his chest. Naming was a dangerous thing. To name was to claim was to protect, and to protect was to risk everything when others demanded surrender. Still, as Luma curled into the hay, repeating the word in gentle whispers, Elias knew he could never take it back. The child was no longer stranger. It was Luma, his charge, his burden, his hope. The days that followed carried a fragile rhythm. Luma, though trembling at every distant shout or whistle, grew bolder in the safety of Elias's company. It mimicked his gestures with uncanny accuracy, raising its hands when he stretched, nodding when he did, even copying the little grunts he made as his weary bones settled onto the stool. When he chuckled at the absurdity, Luma laughed too, a strange, chiming sound that seemed too pure for a world already sharpening its knives. Bread, crusts, and cool water were no longer offerings met with fear, but shared rituals. Luma clutched the wooden cup awkwardly, spilling more than it drank, but the attempt alone filled Elias with an ache he hadn't known in years, an echo of fatherhood long buried beneath the soil of loss. Sometimes the child's eyes reflected his own face, distorted but intent, as though humanity itself was being studied through the lens of innocence. Elias wondered what it must see in him. The lines carved by grief, the stubborn resilience etched into callous hands, the tired strength that refused to break. Whatever judgment it passed, Luma smiled after, as though humanity's roughness was a thing worth mirroring. One evening, as dusk painted the barn in gold and violet, Elias worked in silence, mending a worn harness. The quiet was broken by a sound that froze in mid-stitch. Luma hummed, soft and trembling, a tune unfamiliar yet piercingly familiar. The notes rose and fell with haunting precision, echoing the lullaby once sung by his late wife when their daughter was small. His heart clenched, and the needle slipped, drawing blood. He stared at the child, unable to breathe, torn between awe and terror. How could a creature from stars beyond memory know the melody that had once been the heartbeat of his home? Was it mimicry, plucked from some whispered memory of his own, or was the universe itself cruel enough to stitch threads of his grief into alien throats? Tears blurred his vision, but Elias did not stop the song. He let the notes pour into him, reopening scars, filling them with something both raw and strangely healing. For the first time in years, he whispered his wife's name aloud. Luma looked at him, uncomprehending yet kind, as though it knew the pain hidden in that sound. In its glow, Elias found a piece of her not lost, but remembered. Beyond the barn walls, the village trembled with whispers. Livestock vanished from pens, their trails ending in crushed grass and clawed earth. Goats disappeared without a sound. Chickens scattered with feathers left behind like snow. Some blamed wolves, others cursed the heavens, but none dared voice what lingered in their hearts. The streaks of light in the sky had returned, brighter, bolder, lingering too long to be dismissed as falling stars. In the tavern, men muttered about demons cloaked in radiance, their fear twisting into anger. Women clutched their children closer, barring doors before the moon had risen. Every misfortune was pinned to the same invisible culprit, and the village's unease thickened until it pressed against Elias's door. He listened at night to the crackle of torches outside, the restless murmur of voices seeking answers. Each vanished animal became another stone laid at his feet, though no one spoke his name yet. But suspicion needed little fuel. Elias understood the rhythm of fear. It was a tide that would soon sweep toward the weakest shore, and hidden in his barn lay the very spark that could ignite their darkest suspicions. The child he named Luma was already becoming the monster they dreaded. The neighbor, a man whose bitterness had long festered into envy, moved like a shadow beneath the cover of night. His gaze lingered too long on Elias's fields. His ears bent too close to passing whispers. Driven by suspicion sharpened into malice, he crept toward the barn, drawn by faint glimmers that leaked through the cracks in the wood. From the loft, Luma's glow pulsed faintly, unaware of the danger below. The neighbor's eyes widened as he caught sight of movement within. A small figure, bathed in a soft radiance, curled against the hay. Not human, not right, proof of his darkest suspicions. His breath quickened as he backed away, clutching the vision like a weapon. In his mind, it was no helpless child, but an omen, a curse. He imagined the fear he could stir, the authority he could summon. Elias, stubborn and secretive, would be cast down. The village would rally behind him, the truth-teller, the protector of their way of life. Inside, unaware, Elias slept lightly, yet even in dreams unease stirred. The barn had become both sanctuary and snare, and now the snare had been glimpsed by eyes hungry for ruin. The clock of secrecy had begun to count down. At dawn, Elias sought the counsel of the priest, his heart torn by shadows heavier than his calloused hands could carry. He spoke little, only of burdens and doubts, never naming the truth, yet his words trembled with hidden meaning. The priest, a man of steady voice and kinder eyes, listened with patience born of years, guiding souls through hardship. Fear blinds, the priest murmured, but faith can open what fear would close. He warned Elias that the village was quick to brand anything unknown as cursed, yet urged him to remember that every soul, no matter its form, was placed in the world for a reason. Elias left with no clearer path, yet his heart felt steadier. If the creature was a curse, then why did its laughter heal wounds deeper than time could touch? Why did its glow soften grief rather than sharpen it? Faith, perhaps, was not certainty but the choice to trust when certainty was absent. Still, he knew faith alone would not silence the whispers gathering around him. Faith might guide his steps, but fear was already sharpening the knives of men who did not understand. By midday, the sky throbbed with a distant hum. Military patrols swept across the valley, their drones cutting wide arcs, their scanners raking through homes and barns. The villagers gathered nervously, eyes flicking to Elias's land with growing suspicion. Soldiers questioned, probed, measured, leaving behind only heavier silences. Elias guided Luma into a narrow passage beneath the barn, a space dug long ago to hide grain from thieves. The child's glow dimmed, as though it sensed a danger pressing above. Elias pressed a finger to his lips, heart pounding, and waited as boots struck the floorboards overhead. A beam of light cut through the slats, searching, lingering far too long. Elias held his breath until his lungs burned, ready to shield the child with his body if discovery came. Then, as suddenly as it began, the boots receded. The barn door creaked, then slammed. Silence returned, heavy and trembling. Elias exhaled, pressing his forehead against the damp earth. Luma touched his hand, its tiny fingers cool and steady. He realized then that the child trusted him without question, and that trust demanded a courage greater than any he had ever needed in the fields. But courage could not control fear, and fear had a way of breaking free. One night, as thunder rolled over the hills, Luma startled at the storm. Its glow flared, brighter than ever, and in its terror, energy surged outward in a sudden burst. The air shimmered, hay rustled, and a field of light spread across the barn, like a shield woven of stars. It lasted only moments, fading as quickly as it appeared. But those moments were enough. Outside, the neighbor lurked, ever watchful, and the glow lit his face in pale astonishment. What he saw was not a frightened child, but a creature wielding powers beyond reason, a danger too great to ignore. He fled with the vision etched into his mind, already shaping it into a tale to spread among fearful ears. Words could be sharper than blades, and his would cut deeply. He would speak of unnatural forces, of sorcery cloaked in innocence, of Elias harboring a monster ready to unleash ruin. Inside the barn, Elias cradled Luma, heart racing. The child wept, unaware of the danger its own nature had unleashed. Elias knew then that secrecy had ended. The village would come, and they would not come with kindness. The neighbor's tongue worked faster than fire. By dawn, the village boiled with fear. Tales spread of a glowing monster, of wings hidden beneath hay, of Elias's pack with forces that threatened them all. Each retelling sharpened the story, twisting Luma's innocence into menace. The villagers gathered with torches in hand, their eyes reflecting the flames of their fear. Elias watched from his doorway as suspicion hardened into hostility. Old debts, old grudges, and unspoken envy now found a rallying cry. His land, his solitude, his secrecy, all painted him as guilty before any word of offense could pass his lips. The priest pleaded for caution, but faith was drowned beneath the roar of fear. The sound of boots, the crackle of fire, the hiss of whispered threats crept closer. Elias gripped the barn door, his heart torn between fighting for the child or fleeing into the night. Inside, Luma clung to him, its glow dimmed to a trembling flicker. The bond they shared was no shield against a mob, convinced it had seen the face of evil. The village was no longer a home. It had become a storm, and Elias stood at its center. When night fell again, Elias led Luma beyond the barns, away from the prying eyes and restless fires. They sat together in the open fields where stars blanketed the sky in their countless thousands. Elias pointed upward, naming constellations, telling stories of hunters, heroes, and wanderers. His voice carried not authority but tenderness, a fragile attempt to give the child a piece of humanity worth remembering. Luma listened wide-eyed, then bent to the soil, tracing shapes with glowing fingers. Star maps formed in the dirt, intricate lines and symbols unlike any Elias had seen. Among them was a mark repeated again and again, a spiral surrounding a single point, a home, perhaps, or a plea for return. The child touched his hand, offering the drawing as though to say, "This is where I belong." Elias's throat tightened, but he squeezed back, answering with the only lesson he knew. "Then we will endure until you return." Under the silent watch of the cosmos, the bond between man and alien deepened, not forged of shared blood or language, but of kindness and defiance of fear. Beneath the stars, Elias vowed that humanity's measure would be protection, not betrayal. Fear, once a whisper, had swollen into a roar. The neighbor, drunk on self-righteousness, moved from door to door, weaving stories of glowing monsters and curses carried on starlight. His words were tinder, the village, dry wood eager to burn. Soon, torches were lit, their flames clawing at the night, and the crowd marched toward Elias's farm. Boots trampled earth, voices rose in fury, and suspicion hardened into rage. Mothers clutched their children close, hiding them behind walls, while men sharpened tools into weapons. The march became a storm of humanity twisted by terror, and at its head strode the neighbor, his eyes gleaming with triumph. Elias heard them before he saw the glow of their fire. The sound was a rolling tide, a rhythm of vengeance that no argument could still. His hands tightened and his heart sank. He had tilled this land beside these people, buried his dead under the same soil, shared seasons of famine and a harvest. Yet here they came, not as neighbors, but as a mob, Within the barn, Luma stirred, sensing the approach of danger. Elias whispered reassurance, though his voice betrayed the tremor of dread. The storm had finally reached his door. The mob halted at the edge of Elias's yard, torches hissing in the night air. Their shadows danced along his walls, wild and monstrous. At the front, the neighbor's voice split the silence like a blade. He shouted of curses brought to their fields, of livestock stolen, of unnatural lights. His words painted Elias not as a farmer, but as a traitor who had welcomed evil into their midst. They demanded the creature. A demon child. They called it a vessel of ruin. Some crossed themselves, others spat, but all fixed their eyes on Elias with the same burning certainty. Elias stood tall in the doorway, his body a shield, though inside he shook with grief and fury. He called them blind, begged them to see reason, but his words dissolved in the frenzy. To them, his defiance was proof of guilt. Behind him, Luma clung to the hay, its glow faint and frightened, the sound of voices striking its small frame like blows. Elias knew the truth was no weapon here. Fear had already chosen its prey, and no argument could unbind it. The people he had once called his own now demanded a sacrifice he would never give. The air trembled with a deeper sound, one that silenced even the mob. Engines roared as armored vehicles rolled into the village. Their lights sweeping across faces turned pale with awe. Drones rose into the sky, humming like mechanical hornets, while soldiers in heavy gear marched with precision. The mayor stepped forward, words half-formed, but the commander silenced him with a raised hand. Orders barked through radios confirmed the worst. They had come for the alien specimen. The mob, once so loud, now hushed, their courage folding in the face of authority. The neighbor, eager to claim credit, pointed to Elias's barn with trembling eagerness. His voice cracked as he proclaimed his loyalty to human safety, his betrayal sealed in the name of righteousness. The soldiers nodded, their weapons rising, their scanners already buzzing with readings from within the barn. Elias felt the earth shift beneath him. The mob had been fire, but these soldiers were steel, sharpened, and unyielding. Their intent was clear. The child was not salvation nor curse, but property to be seized. Luma, trembling behind him, pressed close as if sensing the net drawing tight. Elias realized that the battle had grown larger than fear. It had become war. Elias stepped from the doorway, his body squared against both torchlight and the cold gleam of military rifles. Alone, a tired farmer scarred by loss, he faced villagers who once shared his bread and soldiers whose armor gleamed with state power. The world had chosen its sides, and he was left standing on the narrow bridge between them. He raised his voice, not in defiance of law or tradition, but in defense of something far older, compassion. He spoke of innocence, of a child that had harmed no one, of the duty to protect rather than destroy. Yet his pleas struck deaf ears. To the villagers, his words were weakness. To the soldiers, irrelevance. A command rang out, sharp and merciless. Stand aside. The rifles leveled and the torches flared. Elias's hands trembled, yet he did not move. He would not betray what trust had been placed in him, no matter the cost. Behind him, Luma whimpered, a sound more human than alien, and clutched his shirt. The small weight against his back steeled his spine. He was no soldier, no leader, no hero carved in stone. But he was human, and in that moment, humanity demanded he stand. The barn door shuddered as soldiers advanced, boots pounding in unison, the mob pressing close behind. The heat of torches mingled with the cold gleam of steel. Elias turned, his eyes meeting Luma's, and for the first time he saw not strangeness but the pure fragility of childhood. The child's glow flickered erratically, fear threatening to break it apart. Luma threw itself against him, small arms wrapping his waist, face buried in his chest. Its trembling body radiated both warmth and desperation, as if clinging to him could anchor it against the tide of hatred. Elias's heart broke with the weight of the choice before him. Surrender meant survival, perhaps for him, perhaps even for Luma, though in chains. Resistance meant ruin, but also dignity, the refusal to become betrayer of something so helpless. His arms closed around the child instinctively, a father's embrace reborn after years of emptiness. The soldiers paused at the sight, their rifles steady but their steps uncertain. For a heartbeat, silence reigned, broken only by the rasp of Elias's breath. He whispered a promise no one else would hear. He would not let go. Not now, not ever. The commander barked the final warning. Surrender the creature, or be cut down with it. The mob pressed forward, hungry for resolution, their fear boiling over into demand for blood. Every eye bore down on Elias, waiting to see him break. But Elias did not break. He lifted his chin, gaze steady despite the tremor in his hands. His voice rang out, rough and worn, yet strong enough to carry through the chaos. You'll have to kill me first. The words struck like stone against glass. The villagers recoiled in shock, mutters splitting their unity. Even the soldiers hesitated, their training jarred by the defiance of man who should have been powerless. Elias stood not as a rebel nor a zealot, but as a farmer whose only weapon was his humanity. Luma's glow pulsed softly, as though it understood the cost of his decision. The embrace between them deepened, a vow forged not in words but in resolve. Elias had chosen, and his choice carved a line through the night. Compassion against cruelty, defiance against fear. The rifles lifted once more, and Elias knew his death was second away. But he also knew he would die unbroken. In the heartbeat before the rifles fired, Luma's fear erupted into light, not the gentle glow that had warmed the barn, but a torrent of radiance that seared across the night sky. Energy rippled outward in waves, invisible yet undeniable, crashing against torches, rifles, and drones alike. Soldiers staggered. Villagers fell to their knees. Hands pressed against temples as the wave pierced both body and mind. The light was not violence, but a cry, a scream woven into the fabric of the stars. Images burst across Elias's mind, fractured visions of alien cities of crystal and fire, starships soaring through nebulae, a people mourning the absence of one of their own. Luma's terror and longing spilled outward, carrying a message no human tongue could shape. Lost, alone, endangered, Elias held the child as the wave tore through him, his body trembling, his vision blurred with stars. Around him, men wept, soldiers cursed, the mob crumbled beneath the sheer force of otherworldly grief. The light dimmed, but the air hummed with its echo. Elias knew, with a certainty that rooted him in awe and dread, that the message had been heard. Somewhere beyond the horizon of the sky, something had answered. The night broke open with sound and fury. Clouds split apart as shapes vast and radiant descended from the heavens. Starships unlike any human craft hovered above the village, their hulls gleaming with shifting colors that defied description. Engines whispered thunder, and light stretched like rivers of fire across the dark. The villagers cowered, their torches guttering against the brilliance above. Soldiers scrambled to relay orders, their voices frantic, but their weapons felt like toys before the majesty unfolding overhead. The air vibrated with a resonance that pierced through bone and spirit, a sound both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Elias held Luma tighter, his heart pounding with both wonder and fear. The ships hung suspended like gods watching over ants, their presence undeniable, their intent unknowable. Yet even through the terror, Elias felt a surge of hope. The child's cry had reached its kin. The neighbor, once bold, fell silent, his face pale as ash. The mob broke, scattering, their courage shattering beneath the weight of something greater than their hatred. Humanity, in that moment, stood small beneath the gaze of the cosmos. The sky had answered, and its voice was beyond human judgment. From the lead ship descended figures clad in armor that shimmered like living metal, their forms tall, graceful, and terrible in their beauty. They moved with purpose, each step resonating like a drumbeat of inevitability. At their center stood one whose presence commanded silence. Eyes glowed with the same light that pulsed within Luma. The villagers shrank back as the figure spoke, words translated not by machines but by resonance in the mind. The child they sought to destroy was no mere wanderer, but an heir, scion of a royal line that stretched across stars and centuries. Its survival was not only precious, but vital, a thread woven into the fate of an empire. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the humans. Soldiers lowered their rifles, uncertainty written across their faces. The mob, once so loud, now quivered in shame and fear. Elias stood still, Luma in his arms, stunned yet unyielding. The alien's gaze turned to him, piercing and heavy. His defiance, his compassion, his refusal to betray, these were weighed like currency. Humanity itself stood trial in that gaze, its future reputation bound to the choice of one farmer who had chosen love over fear. The air hung heavy as judgment settled. The alien leader's voice rippled through every mind, acknowledging the cruelty of fear, but also the miracle of compassion. Where a mob had chosen hatred, one man had chosen protection. Where soldiers had sought control, a farmer had offered love. The weight of that decision would shape not only Elias's fate, but the standing of humanity in a galaxy now watching. The villagers lowered their torches, shame washing over them in waves. The neighbor, once boldest of all, could not meet Elias's gaze. Soldiers, stripped of certainty, stood down, their weapons lowered in reluctant respect. Elias, weary and scarred, felt no triumph, only relief that the child in his arms was safe, and dread for the cost his choice might still bring. Luma, however, glowed softly, no longer trembling but radiant with trust. The alien leader bowed its head slightly toward Elias, a gesture of profound weight. Compassion, it declared, was the measure by which humanity would be remembered. Not fear, not cruelty, but the act of one farmer who refused to betray a child. The night closed around them, not in despair, but in awe. Humanity had been tested, and had, for now, endured. The meadow blazed with radiance as the alien beings descended, their towering forms bathed in silver fire. Their presence bent the air itself, a hush falling across the trembling crowd. Luma's small form was dwarfed by their majesty, yet the child clung desperately to Elias, glowing fingers gripping rough fabric as though love alone could hold back destiny. Elias felt the weight of countless eyes upon him, villagers, soldiers, and beings from beyond the stars, but none mattered except the trembling child pressed against his chest. Gentle hands of shimmering light reached forward, beckoning, reclaiming what was theirs. Elias's arms stiffened, his heart urging defiance, but he knew he could not keep what the cosmos itself had come to retrieve. With a final, aching breath, he whispered a promise that compassion would endure. Slowly, painfully, he let go, and the child was lifted toward the heavens. As the alien arms drew Luma upward, the child's glow flickered, dimming in sorrow. A voice, fragile and halting, broke through the charged silence. Elias. The name trembled on lips not meant for human words, raw and imperfect yet undeniable. It struck Elias harder than any blade, a single syllable carrying gratitude, love, and loss. His chest tightened, eyes stinging, as the villagers gasped at the miracle of sound. Humanity had given the child more than shelter. It had given identity. The word echoed like a vow, binding man and alien across the gulf of species, time and endless stars. The villagers stood frozen, torches guttering, their anger withering in the radiance above, all warred with shame in their eyes. Some bowed their heads, struck dumb by the grandeur of beings beyond imagination. Others shuffled uneasily, burdened by guilt that fear had driven them to madness. Yet a few burned with defiance, their scowls fixed on Elias as if his compassion had exposed their cowardice. No one spoke. Silence stretched across the fields, broken only by the hum of alien craft above. The weight of what they had witnessed would never leave them. It was carved into memory, indelible and eternal. The mayor, once resolute in warning, stood pale and unsteady, his voice cracking with confession. Fear blinded us, he admitted. Words dragged from a reluctant heart. We nearly destroyed ourselves in the shadow of what we did not understand. His gaze swept over the people, seeing their lowered heads and clenched fists, knowing the truth cut deep. Leadership had failed not in strength but in compassion, and that failure would haunt him. Yet in Elias he saw an ordinary man who had carried extraordinary courage, a reminder that wisdom sometimes lies beyond authority. His voice faltered as he added, "Perhaps trust, not suspicion, must guide us when the unknown arrives again." The villagers shifted uneasily, torn between humility and denial. The words lingered, planting seeds of doubt in long-held convictions. For the first time, the mayor's authority felt less like command and more like fragile pleading. The priest stepped forward, robe shimmering in alien light, his voice steady where others faltered. "Compassion is a measure of humanity," he said softly, his words cutting through the restless murmurs. Not weapons, nor walls, nor fear. This child was not a curse but a gift, and Elias saw what we could not. His eyes moved across the villagers, neither condemning nor excusing, only reminding. If fear rules us, we will be nothing more than frightened animals. If compassion guides us, we may yet be worthy of the stars. Silence followed, heavy with the truth no one dare refute. Yet bitterness still festered. The neighbor, whose suspicion had sparked the mob, spat words into the silence. Do not be deceived. He risked us all for that glowing demon. What happens when they return, demanding more? Elias's choice may cost us everything. His voice dripped with venom, fanning embers of doubt. Some villagers nodded, fearful once more, clinging to suspicion as armor against shame. Others recoiled, unwilling to follow him further. But the poison was planted, a warning that not all hearts could be swayed by wonder. Where all healed, resentment lingered, promising future storms yet to come. Elias returned to his farmhouse as dawn crept over the horizon, the alien ships fading into the heavens. The silence of the barn pressed upon him, hollow and unbearable. Hay lay scattered where the child once slept, carrying faint traces of warmth already fading. Every corner whispered memory. Small hands reaching for bread, laughter echoing among chickens, starlight eyes watching him with unspoken trust. Now it was gone, leaving only emptiness heavier than stone. Elias sat upon the worn wooden floor, calloused hands trembling, his heart aching with absence. The world had shifted, yet his home remained the same, too quiet, too vast, and forever marked by what it had sheltered. Tears carved lines through the dirt on Elias's face as grief consumed him, yet within the sorrow stirred something fierce and unyielding. He had not surrendered the child, had not betrayed innocence for safety. In protecting Luma, he had chosen compassion over survival, truth over fear. Pride coiled with pain, bittersweet and powerful. Though his arms were empty, his spirit felt strangely full, etched with the knowledge that his choice mattered. He whispered into the silence, not for anyone to hear but for himself, "I did right." And in that quiet declaration, his grief found shape and meaning. Days passed, yet Elias felt no longer the same solitary farmer who once lived only for routine. The loneliness remained, but it no longer hollowed him. The memory of Luma's laughter lingered like embers in the dark, easing his silence. He carried within him proof that kindness transcended species, that even in isolation he had reached another soul. The barn, though empty, had become a monument to that fragile bond. Each sunrise felt less like repetition and more like promise, that humanity's place among the stars had begun not with conquest, but with farmers' simple act of shelter and trust. Elias stood beneath the night sky, stars burning brighter than ever before. His life remained humble, his fields unchanged, yet he knew his hands had carried destiny. In choosing compassion, he had touched the infinite, and though forgotten by many, the cosmos itself will remember the farmer who dared to love. Weeks passed, the rhythms of farming resuming with aching familiarity. Yet beneath the barn's silence, Elias felt presence lingering. One morning, while turning the soil where Luma once lay hidden, his spade struck something harder than stone. Brushing dirt away, he uncovered a shard that glowed faintly, pulsing with gentle light. Its surface shimmered as if alive, veins of silver threading through crystal. The soil had swallowed it, but the earth could not extinguish the echo left behind. Curiosity overcame hesitation. Elias lifted the shard, warmth seeping into his palm. At his touch, it unfolded with a soft hum, light bending outward like petals blooming. Shapes appeared, lines, constellations, entire galaxies traced in fire. It was a map, alive and incomprehensible, yet beautiful. He realized it was not just memory, but message, perhaps invitation. Somewhere across those lights was Luma's home, distant yet tethered now to his humble barn. A promise shimmered. This story was not over. Beyond Elias's land, whispers spread like wildfire. Travelers spoke of eerie glows drifting across fields at night, livestock vanishing without tracks, and strangers glimpsed beneath starlight who vanished when approached. In distant towns, skies shimmered with colors that defied explanation. Fear and fascination warred within every telling. Some claimed it was demons, others angels, while a few whispered of visitors from the heavens. Whatever the truth, the world stirred with unease, sensing that humanity's horizon had shifted forever. Though no declaration came from governments or kings, people everywhere felt it, a subtle tremor in existence. Humanity's world, once vast and unchanging, suddenly felt small. Technology, ambition, and faith all strained under the weight of what might be coming. Farmers, priests, scholars, and soldiers alike sensed the pull of something immense. A quiet dread coiled with fragile hope. The skies no longer seemed distant and indifferent but watchful, carrying the weight of vast, unseen destinies pressing closer. As Elias worked his fields, he pondered how history might remember these days. Scholars would argue over evidence. Leaders would posture for power, yet none of them had been there when it mattered. It was not armies nor scientists who bridged the gulf, but one weary farmer offering bread to a trembling child. First contact had not been conquest or calculation. It had been kindness, simple and unassuming, rooted in humanity's oldest strength, compassion without condition. On clear nights, Elias lingered outside, eyes fixed skyward. The shard rested in his pocket, a constant reminder of the bond forged in silence and trust. Sometimes he spoke aloud, his voice carried on the night air. "Take care of yourself, Luma," he would murmur, words mixing grief with hope. He imagined them traveling upward, caught in starlight, reaching ears far beyond. In the solitude of his farm, those whispers became both prayer and promise to the cosmos. One evening, as twilight deepened, Elias glimpsed faint lights flickering along the horizon. Too steady for stars, too graceful for planes, they lingered, watching. His breath caught, torn between fear and wonder. Whether guardians, scouts, or distant kin, he could not know, yet their presence promised the story was far from finished.